What is up, cinephiles, and welcome back to Screen Kings. For today's movie roundup, I have 3 new films that I've seen over the past week. The first one being The Black Phone, directed by Scott Derrickson. This is based on the short story of the same name, written by Joe Hill. Now, Joe Hill is the pen name of Stephen King's son, Joseph Hill. So the narrative mold here feels pretty familiar, and as someone who has read a lot of Stephen King horror short stories, I'm pretty excited to see this one. Now, in it, we have a introverted 13-year-old boy named Finney, played by Mason Thames, who gets abducted by a sinister figure called the Grabber, played by Ethan Hawke. He traps him into this soundproof basement with nothing but a bed, a toilet on the side, and a disconnected black phone, where Finney soon discovers that he can hear the voices of the dead kids that the Grabber killed before. Now, these dead kids will help him to make sure that Finney won't suffer the same fate as them. Now, I thought this is gonna be a mostly set on a one thriller location horror film, so it's glad to see that the actual kidnapping will take place around 30 to 40 minute mark, and we get the whole backstory of Finney here. It's set on the 70s. We see the dynamic of Finney here with his classmates as he's the bullied kid, and also in his household. So by the time that he gets abducted, we are deeply invested in his survival. Now, this is the type of unsettling horror films that knows how to build the tension. It does not purely rely on gore or whatever supernatural entity that horror films have these days. And yeah, I think this movie gets the atmosphere right. It has a lot of creepy song choices, a few jump scares that got me, but it never feels cheap because it's not too telegraphed. This might not be super scary as what the trailer suggests if you are a seasoned horror fan, but if you're someone who gets easily spooked like me, this will get you, especially that I was really in the mindset of what it feels like to be abducted. So this movie really tapped into that primal fear that I have when I was a kid. And that being said, I think this movie is more effective if you view it as a crime thriller with supernatural tones in it as compared to a horror film. But nevertheless, we have a compelling story here. The kid characters here are the breakout stars for me. We have Mason Thames and Madeleine McGraw as the siblings bonded by these supernatural forces. I think they are wonderful in their roles. They execute whatever emotional weight the script demands from them, and Ethan Hawke as the Grabber is just so menacing in here. I think this is the second time that I've seen him play a villain. I've seen him as a cult leader in Moon Knight, and if you think he's eerie in that role, he takes it into a whole other level in this role as the Grabber. Now, he doesn't have much screen time, and most of the time he's wearing a mask, but you can see his personality coming through outside that mask. There are only subtle hints that you can use maybe to make up a backstory for this character that might be a deal breaker for some, but for me, I'm okay with that because the mystery behind the character is what makes him terrifying, and because you don't know him that well, you're not sure what he's going to do next. So it makes more even chilling to watch, and I'm fine that they didn't humanize that character. As for the cons of the movie, maybe since this is based on a short story, they can't really get onto the proper logistics or the plot mechanics on how the Grabber managed to get away with his murders. And if you're looking at an angle of police procedural, we have a lot of inept police officers here, so that might turn you off, but I wouldn't really give it much bearing. Apart from the scares and the atmosphere here, what the movie gets it right is this movie actually has a heart, and I think this one pays tribute to the resilience of young kids, especially to the bullied kids who are standing up against their oppressors, just like what it does, except here you can feel the camaraderie among the dead kids. So in a way, you can view this film as a coming of age film by the end of it, and I think that adds to the thematic weight, you know, making this horror film more memorable. Overall, I think it's a well-rounded horror film, so I'm gonna give this movie a 4 out of 5. I'm just excited to whatever adaptation coming from Joe Hill in the future might hold. So yeah, The next film we have is The Gray Man on Netflix, directed by the Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe, critically acclaimed directors for the Marvel films. So I'm expecting a lot from this movie. In it, we have an agent named Sierra 6, played by Ryan Gosling, a CIA Black Ops assassin who is forced to go on a run after discovering some incriminating agency secrets. Now, CIA has chosen to send out this former psychopathic agent named Lloyd Hansen, played by Chris Evans, and he tracks him all over the world, ensuing a global manhunt. First, on the strengths of the film, I think it's has to do with the technical execution, something that the Russo brothers have done in the past. I think whenever there's running, whenever there's shooting, throwing of bombs, or whatever general mayhem, you can see the movements clearly. I think my favorite scene here would have to be where Six is on the top of a train and he uses the reflection of a building to shoot his enemies who are inside the train. I think that's pretty rad. Their directing skills are really on the masterclass level, and I'm even more fascinated with their use of the drones. Now to the cons of the movie, which might be a lot. The plot is just so cliched, and I can tell that they are trying to set up a James Bond franchise here for Netflix, because this movie is based on a novel which has already 11 books, I believe, and even though I haven't read any of those novels, I can almost tell that that novel is better than this one, because this is a film that it's obvious that these action scenes are the one that drives the story. There are certain landmarks here that the movie needs to hit, and I know for most action films, you're really after that adrenaline. I get that. But it's just so everything here is just a rehash of the past. You can see that this movie is trying to be like James Bond as he travels around the globe. And at one point, Six here becomes an excommunicado, just like in John Wick films. There's a flash drive here that contains a lot of vital information, just like in every Jason Bourne film. It feels like an amalgamation of the previous action films that you've seen, and I think a lot of action films are guilty of that these days. Now, normally I'm more forgiving when it comes to action films, but the writers that we have here, Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, these are the writers for Avengers Endgame, Infinity War, same collaborators for the Russo brothers. So in those movies, Marvel films, they managed to bring out the spectacle but also the substance in the story. This one, it's only feels enjoyable to an extent because the story feels hollow. So we have a lot of action set pieces here but not really much glue to tie this story. That is not to say that this movie is not enjoyable, because this movie supplies the adrenaline rush that you need if you're looking for a new action flick. So this one easily fits the bill. The dynamic among the cast is also enjoyable. We have Ryan Gosling. As expected, he's credible as an action star, and he has a good banter here with Chris Evans as the villain, basically an anti-Captain America. He really is having the time of his life playing this role, no matter how cardboard villain he looks like. Ana de Armas is the character that breaks the stereotype of a damsel in distress, because she is the one who actually does a lot of saving here. And Dhanush, this Indian actor, really made an impression in his limited screen time, though I can say in hindsight that this character is not really necessary to the plot. I think they probably added this to tap into the Indian market or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. So yeah, in terms of that surface level entertainment, there's nothing else much going on in here. I thought there's gonna be, I don't know, discussion here when it comes to the gray matters in CIA work, because the title is called The Gray Man, but there's not really hidden here. But you can still enjoy this when it comes to the bombastic action set pieces. Plenty of spectacle over substance. I just wish they spent some of the money in making a better screenplay, but this is what we got. So I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 5. It's entertaining to an extent, and there are some comedic elements throughout the film, though it mostly benefits on the star power of Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans. Now the next one is the better action film in here, The Roundup, a South Korean crime thriller directed by Lee Sang-yong. This is a sequel to the 2017 film The Outlaws, though you can enjoy this movie as a standalone sequel. This is set 4 years after the events of the first film, where the Gumcheon Police Major Crimes Unit receives this new task of retrieving a South Korean fugitive hiding in Vietnam, and the case is led by Beast Cop Ma-seok-do, played by Ma Dong-seok, and his captain John Il-nam. So this one is basically your classic cops versus criminals story, but it's not predictable. You know, it started off with a manhunt, then it goes to a kidnapping, then I'm not gonna say what else there is to the film because I don't want to spoil it to you guys, but I was on the edge of my seat. There are a lot of good action sequences here, mostly close quarter combats, and a lot of knife fights which are pretty entertaining to watch, and it all ends with a thrilling car chase scene. So most films, when they're sequels, they tend to do bigger. They tend to outdo whatever explosive action scenes that the first film will do. And I like that in here, it remains more grounded than most action films. Granted that there are some over-the-top action set pieces here, it still feels rooted to reality because you can see the drawbacks in the characters here. You can see them getting inflicted with pain, unlike in, say, The Gray Man, where Ryan Gosling gets stabbed multiple times at one point and he's still operating at 90%. So this one takes a more realist route. I would say the pacing is also better in here because the conversations, the key conversations and the action sequences are well spread out. So you get a clear motivation from both parties. The tone of the film, I would say it's pretty comical at times. This is a pretty violent film, though most of the gore is shown off screen, but it managed to be a crowd pleaser, an action thriller film, because it has, you know, natural comedy coming from Ma Dong-seok. Now, he has this deadpan acting here, but there's so much joy to be found whenever he beats these bad guys. He is kind of a cop that uses brute force to a fault at times, so sometimes that might not sit well to the audiences, but just because he's doing it to bad guys and shady guys who actually deserve it, it's easier to swallow. Ma Dong-seok is one of those actors who can actually sell the physicality required by the character, and also is a great character. So at this point, I'm looking at him as the Dwayne Johnson of South Korea because he's just so likable that it brings the movie into a whole new level. Seok-koo, who is the villain of this movie, in here he's basically a Korean expat who preys on Korean tourists in Vietnam and kidnaps them for ransom. So he is a homicidal villain here that actually feels like a legit threat. So when these two forces clashes by the third act, it's super entertaining to watch. And then the rest of the Crimes Division unit, they have all good banter, slapstick camaraderie. I like the energy and the chemistry among them, but of course the main star here is Ma Dong-seok. When it comes to the world of crime, I like how the movie is able to present how the higher ups, you know, the elite people and the middle class and the criminal underground are all interrelated. So you got a lot of insight on how these things work. So overall, I think this is a well-made, competent film. It doesn't necessarily break new ground, but I think this is my second favorite action film of the year, the first one being Top Gun Maverick. The Roundup is stylish, gritty, it's energetic, it's witty, it fires on all cylinders. So if you're looking for a gateway film to get hooked to South Korean crime thrillers, I think this is the one. So I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5 stars. I had a great time watching this movie, and that is my review for the 3 films that I've seen this week. How about you? Let me know what you think in the comment sections down below. Also, if you enjoyed watching this video, hit that like and subscribe to me for more content. Thank you so much guys for watching. Until then, I'll see you all on the next one.